Hope my screen is also visible to you now.
Yeah.
So right now I am using this Visual Studio for writing a Python code. Uh, it's not that all the time we are going to use this Visual Studio. Fine. So give me a minute. Yeah. Not all the time we are going to use this Visual Studio code, dependent on the requirement for which, like what type of the task we are doing. If
Mhm.
we are dealing with data, so my suggestion to go with the Jupyter notebook. If we are writing any machine learning model, so we should go with the uh, that one, Spider. Fine. But if you are writing starting with the Python stuff, my suggestion to go with the Visual Studio. Visual Studio is kind of the smart IDE, which is not only for Python, which can be used for the different languages as well. Now,
Okay.
one thing I just want to add before starting our discussion on this Python. Uh, the very first thing about my training, what I do is I do provide a daily basis assignment. Daily basis assignment in the sense of that whatever which we had covered today, you will be able to, you got an one assignment. In the end, the motive behind this that you have to do by your own. Some of the
Mhm.
stuff that coding is something like you will be not able to learn by just watching the videos and conducting the session. You have to do some of the stuff by your own. That's the reason I provide this daily basis assignment. And after this, we have something known as the weekly basis assignment. Weekly basis assignment in the sense of like whatever which we had covered today. We know like daily basis assignment help us to understand the individual concept. So assume we have in a week we had covered four concept A, B, C, and D. So we
Mhm.
individually I know that what exactly A, B, C, and D. So weekly assignment help us to understand at which scenario, which at which situation, which concept is going to be used and how I can use in a one single code. Fine, dependent on the requirement. Another
Mhm.
thing about my training part is, so this was about the uh, assignments. Another thing I want to ask is nothing will be like a pre-written code. Each and every time I will come up with you with a new blank screen, and the front of you will be I will be just writing a Python code. So I'm just going to save this thing. It's in August. I just want to save this as a test1.py file. Right now I'm using a Visual Studio as I had mentioned for writing the Python code for now. Now, syntax of Python is very much easy, to be very much honest. The major thing is we need to understand the base, like how programming actually working. Fine. In actual, what we are doing is we are just providing the uh, instruction to the machine what I want. Fine. So like assume that we are providing task. Let me give you one example. So assume that me and one of my friend is sitting in my room. I forgot a bucket outside my room, so I'm just providing some instruction to my friend that, hey, my friend, can you bring that bucket back to me? Fine. So what I'm doing, I'm just providing the instruction, I'm just providing a task to my friend, and he will do the same. So if he is doing this task, he need to follow some of the instruction. Follow some instruction in the sense of like first he will stand up from his seat, open the door. Give me a minute. Yep. So I hope I'm audible again. So he will open the door, go outside the room, pick that bucket, and bring back to me. Fine. So to do the simple task, he have to follow some of the instruction. In the same way, if I am providing a task to my machine, I also need to provide the right instruction that how this task is going to be performed. So Python belong to that type of the language in which we are providing an instruction that how this task is going to be performed. The very first thing about the Python. Another thing, whatever which we are going to be covered in our Python, it will be same for each and every programming language. If I'm talking about the variables, that how variables work and all these things, concept is totally same, just a syntax difference which we have. And another thing is, right now maybe you have an idea like why you want to run this Python. If you are willing to run Python, that means somehow you have an idea for which scenario, for which purpose you are going to use. That is fine. But I will also show you with a brief description like what are the basically the use cases where this Python exists. Fine. What are the different scenarios where this Python is going to be used? If I want to develop any application where this Python exists, if I want to develop any kind of the data analysis stuff, fine. What will be the use of Python? From where the data is gathered? Fine. The basically kind of whole introduction of the IT world. What is happening? One thing, as per my experience, because I'm this in here from last 9 years. So I had worked with, as I had mentioned, with different domains, developing the application, developing RESTful APIs, doing some data analysis stuff, writing the machine learning models as well, doing data engineering stuff as well. So without wasting a lot of time, I'm just starting with the syntax of this Python. We have
Mhm.
something known as a variable. We have something known as a variable in Python, not only Python, in each and every programming language. The way of assigning the variable is something, assume that I'm just passing name as an Aman and I'm just passing age as a something known as a 39. Two variables I have. Simple, in a Python, we are just writing two variables. Name is equal to Aman, age is equal to 39. Fine. Variables, if I'm talking about the definition of the variables, one definition says that act as a container. It act as a container. So for now, I am just saying that this name is a variable. This age is another variable, which is acting as a container. That means this Aman is going to be stored into this name, and this 39 is going to be stored into this age. Fine, one thing. Now for me, this is a one single line, and this is second line. Fine, a simple thing for me. But in actual, it consists of three things. What the three things are, let me also show you. I hope you are able to see my whiteboard again. Yep.
Yep.
Now, the same thing I want to mention at here and will show you how the things are going to be. So I had just mentioned something known as a name as an Aman, fine, and age as an 39. Now for me, it's a one single line, but for system, for our machine, basically, what exactly it is, it consists of some stuff. This is my one thing, this is the second thing, this is a third thing. In the same way, this is a one thing, this is something known as another thing, this is a third thing. Fine. So these three things are there. Now what exactly these three are there? One thing for now you need to remember, whatever which I am writing on the left hand side of this equal to, that is something known as a variable. Variable as a container in which the value is going to be stored. Fine. This equal to is something known as an operator. Fine. Which operator? Later on we'll also discuss the different type of the operators and all these stuff. But for now, just need to remember that this is something known as an operator. Operator is something which is used to do some operation. Now again, now if operator exists, that means some of the operation is happening. What kind of the operation? That this value is going to be stored into this name variable. Again, this operator exists at here. So what is going to be happen? This value is going to be stored into this variable. Fine. So this is something known as a value. We can also consider as a data or value, something like this one. So this is another value. Now another thing about the variable. So this is a way of assigning the variable in Python. If I'm talking about, I will also show you the comparison between this Python and C and Java as well. So you will be able to understand the differences between. And later on, we'll also discuss more about the data types, the size consumed by this variable, and all these things. But for now, as per this Python, we need to understand the concept and the behind the scene what is happening. Now, as per the definition, that this variable is something which act as a container. One thing that is clear, okay, we get to know that this value is going to be stored into this age variable. Now the question comes, now the point is, if it is acting as a container where this variable exists, fine, somehow in our memory it is going to be stored. So here, all the time, not only in Python, even in each and every programming language, what is going to be happen, this variable is going to be stored into our processing memory, our RAM, not in our hard disk, it will be our RAM. Fine. So how much variables we have? Two variables for now. But one is for the name, second one is for the age. As per the Python perspective, which we had defined as per the syntax of this Python. Fine. So assume this is for the name variable, this is for the age variable. So two blocks are going to be created in our processing memory. Fine. Another thing, we have some concept of the pointer. Pointer basically it's not exist in Python, but behind the scene we are using C Python. So I will show you where this Python exists and all the pointer exists and all these stuff. Because if I started by today, you will be totally confused. I am going to explain this in a simple way. Fine. So for now, just we need to remember that in our processing memory, two blocks are going to be created. That means for two variables. If we have a one variable, one block is going to be created. So here, as per the definition, that variable act as a container. So somewhere it is going to be stored. Fine. Another thing. Now, if something, a block is going to be created in my processing memory, how much size is going to be consumed by that particular block? Another question. Size of the block dependent on the type of the data, like what kind of the data I am storing. So here you can see both values have offered both value belong to the different type. How we can say? Because this name consists of my characters, this age consists of my numbers. Fine. So we have some particular that definition like particular data type, but for now, for the starting understanding of this concept, you can see it is just a collection of the characters and this is something known as a number. Fine. So somehow dependent on the type of the data, what kind of the value you are going to store in a variable, dependent on that data, this uh, size of the block is going to be considered. The second thing. Third thing is, like, for how much time, assume that I have my processing memory is something. Assume that, just for an example, assume that 5 and 512 GB, or basically now it's for the supercomputer, we can say. For a normal system, assume that my RAM is something 4 GB. Fine. 8 GB, 12 GB. For simple one, just for the understanding perspective, I'm just going to consider this example, 4 GB RAM. Now
Mhm.
I had written a lot of Python code, so multiple variables exist. Fine. So this memory can be fill up easily. Now, point is, like, what will be the duration of this variable? For how much time period this variable exists in our memory? And if I want to delete, what will be the process? Fine. So, very first point, we need to understand that a variable exists in memory. That is fine, but it will only exist in our memory till the code is in an execution process. Now I had written two variables for the understanding purpose. I had written two variables. I'm just going to, you can see, this is my Python file, test1.py file. I am going to execute with Python 3. Actually, I have both of the version of Python, Python 2 and Python 3. And our training will be on a Python 3 because no one is using Python 2. So all my trainings are in my Python 3. If you want to understand the difference between both of them, then we can also discuss because I had also worked with the Python 2 as well. Fine. So Python 3 test1.py file, I want to execute this one. You can see millisecond it take, and that is a life, that is a duration for how much time this variable exists. Millisecond, because the execution of this code that take millisecond. Fine. So till the code is in an execution process, this variable exists. Once the code terminated, there is nothing like a variable in our memory, something like this. So assume here in our test1.py file, we have two variables, name and age. Assume that I'm creating another file and I want to use this name and age. So it is not going to be work. Reason behind it, that it does not exist in our memory. If you want to if you want to make this a kind of store this variable, so you need to execute that particular code. Fine. Or you need to use this particular code. This is how the memory, this is how the variable exists in our memory. Fine. So this is our basic kind of the introduction about the variables. Many more ways are there. Many more things are there. If I'm talking about variables, many more things are there. There is something, the different ways of assigning the variables. We have to use the naming convention for the variables. Fine. A lot of things are there. Fine. So naming convention, being a professional developer, we should follow the naming convention. So even I, if you had seen maybe or you had conducted a demo from any another trainer, maybe not sure. Some of they say something like this is an A, this is something known as a B. Fine. So we should not use this kind of the variable. For the learning perspective, we can use this variable, but being a professional developer or being a professional coder, we should use the name of the variable which totally reflect what kind of the data it consists of. Fine. So naming convention play an important role. So we'll also discuss more about the naming convention. So starting from the very much basic note, I just get to know I that you are totally new. So we are not in hurry. So starting from the very much basic to the advanced level of this Python, and that is for sure that after completion of our my training, you will be proper able to write a raw Python code. That is for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
Fine. So assume this is your mobile screen. You are able to see something like two fields out there. This is for the username. This is for the password. This is for the sign in button. This is for the forget password. This is a small button for the sign up. Fine. Now what we are doing, assume that I am providing my username. I'm providing my password and I just want to click on the sign in button. So on the click on the sign in button, I am able to see my home page. Fine. One scenario. Fine. Else, if my credentials are not correct, I will be able to see the same screen with the particular message that invalid credential kind of the stuff. But did you got a chance to understand how actually internally this thing is going to be happen? Fine. So the screen which you are able to see, some other language is going to be used to develop that kind of the screen. That comes under a front-end technology. Front-end technology or the mobile technology. Some of the languages are there. Something known as a Flutter, something known as a Android, iOS, React Native. So these are some of the languages which is used to develop this kind of the UI part for the screening, for the mobile screening. Fine. Then on the click on the sign in button, how the things are going to be work. Assume that there is another stuff, something known as a database. For now, we are not going to understand what are the types of database, how the data is going to be stored, something not like this. For now, this is something kind of the mobile. This is something known as a database. Fine. Database for now, just you can consider as a storage system where all the things are going to be stored. If I want to log in, fine. First of all, my information. What kind of my information? My username, my email, my contact number, my photo, profile photo, then my location. So that comes under a one structure, something like a user information that is also available. Another thing, what I posted, fine. Whom should whom I had liked, on which post I had made some comment, fine. My activity log, fine, which I search for. You can consider database as something one thing which consists of all of the things, all of the collection of my activities in that platform that is going to be captured. Now I want to log in. That means my credential, my username and password is available in my database, but I am in my mobile screen. Fine. So here what is going to be happen, if you want to deal with this database, one backend technology is going to be used. Fine. One backend technology is going to be used which act as a middleware between your mobile screen and from the database. That backend logic is available somewhere in the cloud. Later on we'll discuss, but for the understanding perspective, this will be the fine picture. Now on a click on the sign in button, what is going to be happen? One API is going to be hit, which consists of your username and password, which you had provided, that will send into the backend technology, backend language, we can say, or we can say of the server side language. Fine. Python is one of them. Now, note I'm saying that only Python is there. Python is one of them. That means this is a one use case of this Python. Fine. Many more use cases are there, but here we are using this thing, our application daily basis we are using. So the reason why I picked this example just to show you where this Python can be used. So Python is a one, this is a one of the use case of Python which can interact with my mobile team, and from the database, it will get up the data from here, do some business logic at here, and will send up the response to the API, so that which you are able to see in your mobile screen. Now you clicked on the sign in button, your username and password come up to this Python. Assume that I'm using the Python at here. Now Python is not a storage part. Our storage part is something known as a database. So Python connect with the database. It will check about whatever the username you had sent it. If exist, it will get up the all the object. It will compare the password. That means all the business logic is going to be performed at here. Now, if the credentials are fine, again Python interact with the database for which thing that what the thing you are able to see on your home screen, your post, which is going to be visible to you, dependent on your following interest, dependent on your the friend list, dependent on your interest. Fine. So Python get up these things from the database, do some of the business logic, like which post will be the first. Fine. How the comments are going to be, basically proper structured things is going to be sent up to the mobile team. Fine. Through the API. So Python will do some of the business logic, getting the data from it here, sending the response to the mobile team, and that thing will be visible to you. Fine. So this is actually this is a one of the use case of this Python. Many more use cases are there. Databases here, how we can connect the Python for with the data warehouse for the doing some analysis, for doing some of the engineering stuff, for doing some of the transformation on which we are applying some machine learning logic. So totally dependent on the requirement, but this is a kind of the big picture about the IT world, how the things are happening. Fine. Later on, we'll also discuss you more of the use cases with this Python. But for now, for the starting part, I think this is the best example for you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Amanpreet. Thank you very much.